Hey guys, good morning. I feel like I haven't seen y'all in forever. Today we are diving into the last week of Unit 3, and we are reading our last poem. No, not last poem. There is one more in the book, but it's one of the last ones we're going to read together before we attack the unit assessment. So on page 22 in your reader, we have the poem Birches, and it's by Robert Frost, who was one of our main men growing up for me in high school. He writes a lot of poetry. I just want to make a note before we get started that this poem is organized very differently than maybe what poems are that you're used to. You don't see stanzas. Stanzas are like the blocks, like they almost look like a paragraph, but they're separated with the lines in between. So here this looks more like a story. We still have that blocky organization, but it's not separated by stanzas. It's more like paragraphs. Also, you're going to notice when we start reading that the ends of the lines do not rhyme like some rhyming poems. So just bringing to mind that poetry can be different, okay? It can be organized differently, and it can sound different, but like most poems, it's kind of telling a story, and we'll be looking for some figurative language. So as we move forward through Birches, we're going to just kind of talk today mostly about some of the meanings of the things that Robert Frost says, and literal and figurative meanings, okay? All right, we're starting on page 22, and we'll start with, when I see birches bend to the left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees. We have a comma here, and in poetry, commas to me are important. They're always important, but they're almost more important because they kind of tell you when to take those breaths in the midst of reading. And before I go on any further, I want to remind you that birches, a lot of us picked some of these pictures for our picture walk at the beginning of the unit, are trees. And so throughout this poem, we have pictures of the birches at different seasons of the year. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging on them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Curious why he might like to think that some boys have been swinging on them. Do you think that kind of takes him back maybe to childhood memories? Probably. It's a nicer thought than just ice storm hurting the trees, right? Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and creases their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. I like these words. Shattering and avalanching kind of allows us to really visualize that ice just falling off. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load. I'm going to highlight this word bracken. We have a number next to it, and I don't know if you guys remember, but that usually means at the bottom of whatever you're reading, it'll let you know what that is. And it says it's, you can't see it on my page. On your page you can. At the bottom down here it says a fern-like plant or a cluster of plants. Okay, so let's go back real quick to this little paragraph stanza here. It's shattering and avalanching on the snow crust, so all that ice is breaking off the trees. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. Is there really broken glass on the trees? No way, Jose. So the broken glass is referred to that ice that's shattering. It's shattering like glass would. So that was a really nice metaphor to compare it to broken glass. And then it said you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. That's just how much is everywhere. And they seem not to break, though once they are bowed. So once the trees are bowed over here, like you see them in the picture, they're bowed and bent over, they don't break. I have some trees like that in my backyard. They drive me crazy, actually, because they're not straight. So low for long, they never right themselves, which is why I told my husband we were going to cut them down. You may see their trunks arching in the woods. What does this mean? Trunks arching in the woods. Years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground, like girls on hands and knees when they throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. I love this use of figurative language. You'll see the trees. I wish I could make my camera a little bigger and you actually see the words still. All right, guys, so I want you to imagine this, visualize. It says, you see them bent over, right? For so long, they never right themselves again, so they never stand up straight again. You may see their trunks arching in the wood. So the trunks, the bottom of the tree. Years afterwards, trailing their leaves, so they're still trailing leaves, they're still growing, they're not dead, on the ground like girls. So remember, like, when we use the word like and comparing two things, that is a simile. Like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. So I that's a really cool, imagery. I don't know if you visualize this or not, but I'm going to do a quick little sketch. Okay, here's my girl, and here's her head. She's draped it over. Here's her hands. A quick drawing. So she's on her hands and knees with her hair in the sun, drying. Doesn't that look kind of like the trees draped over? It's kind of cool, right? But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact. So notice they've used the word truth with a capital letter as if she is a person. About the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, who only play what he has found, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. So when he learned the truth of the trees and their bending, he says, I would prefer it be that little boy swaying on the trees, bending the trees, playing, that little boy who's too far from town to go to learn baseball, so he just plays in the woods and plays alone. Do you think, I wonder, if this makes him think of his childhood? Maybe. One by one he subdued. You look down here, it says subdue means to conquer his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about launching out too soon and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise. Poise means balance. To the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup, up to the brim and even above the brim. What happens when you fill a cup above the brim? Yeah, it fizzes over, right? It spills over the top of your cup. So the idea is he's climbing up the tree until he gets to the top. And at the top of trees, we know the top of the tree is not as sturdy as the bottom of the tree. So when all his weight gets to the top, tumbles over kind of like that can or that cup of drink. So this is a really nice thought. This page 24 takes us to a thought of what could be if ice storms weren't the reason for these birches and their bending and their changing. Then he flung outward, feet first with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself, a swinger of birches. Looky there, we had that I wonder on the last page. So it does sound like maybe these are some memories of his childhood. And so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood. Anybody ever been out in the woods playing and don't have a path to walk on? I want you to see if you can think of a time. I know you are young, much younger than me. Think of a time already in your little life where you've thought that life was too much. It was like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs. I want you to think about that time in your life where you would compare it to a pathless wood. Broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig having lashed across it open. Everybody's been smacked in the face by a branch, right? I have. I'd like to get away from Earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. Oh boy. The older you get, guys, the more you're going to say, if I could do it over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb back branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, and then what will it do? But dip its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. Oh, I like this poem. Okay, so this poem is deep. This poem has a lot of meaning, and I get that. So we have to think about the poem. In the beginning, we're talking about the reality of why trees sometimes are bent in the woods. And I have a picture. Maybe I'll have time with the sun, if the sun comes up enough, to take some of the ones I have. Trees are bent. What really happens to them, and then what the author of this poem would like to think has happened to them. And he lets us know that when he was a child, he did go to the woods. He did swing on the birches, and he did play in the woods. So we know that these ideas are coming from his own mind. And then I love this last page. I think page 26 is my absolute favorite, about talking about how all this figurative language about the birch and life, about how, sometimes life is too much and it's like a pathless wood, and we feel like we're getting slapped in the face by the twigs, walking into cobwebs, and how we would love sometimes to be able to get away and come back and do it again, because we've already learned a little from some of those mistakes and things we would do better. And then at the bottom, talking about how climbing the branches of the birch up towards heaven, right until the tree gets too way down and it dips him back down to earth, where he could do it again and again. So that idea of being able to go back and do it again, Make sure you've taken time to jot down our notes and any thoughts you've had, because I'm really curious with my kids when we go to reading today to hear some of your thoughts and your ideas about this poem. So be ready to share that and maybe even write about it in your reader's notebook. I'll see you guys in a little bit. Welcome back.